Today we're at Steelmantown Cemetery in New Jersey. It's a trail and forest reserve that specializes in green burial. So now you only do natural burials. What does that mean for this cemetery?
A natural burial means no embalming, no concrete vault, no upright monuments polished or set in concrete, and biodegradable burial containers. Here at Steelmantown, we have a couple different natural burial options. We have natural burial, of course, then we have what's called Tree of Life, and then we have our Memorial Walk. And when I say Tree of Life and Memorial Walk, that's cremated remains. But you have to understand something. They all have a carbon footprint, as does a natural burial. But ultimately, does it have a carbon offset? The internment aspect of it. If you plant an oak tree and it lives for 500 years, what kind of carbon offset does that create? Does that erase the entire process of a cremation? Does it erase the entire life that was lived? More than likely, yes. So people have to start thinking, if everyone plants a tree, it's going to make a world of difference. This is a great example of a tree of life. So essentially, we've taken the cremated remains and mixed it with the soil and planted this tree in memory of this loved one. That can be engraved, but you can see that they chose not to do that. But this is a really beautiful way to memorialize someone with something that's living. So it's like, they can come here and feel closer to their loved one in life. There are millions upon millions of cremains in the possession of loved ones across this country. They go home with them and they don't know what to do with them. If someone is just learning about it, out of nowhere, and they say, I've never heard about that, when they realize that it's something that we've always done, it used to be called simple burial, they're more intrigued with the concept of you bury people in the woods, or you can participate, you can be part of it. So they're really more interested in, they say, wow, that, it makes sense. Everyone has the capacity to care for their loved one in death. It's in their DNA. They just don't know it. And it's been locked up in a little box for a long time. And once you expose that to them, they become more accepting of it. This is a great example of a natural burial. Here we have a shrouded burial. Right here we have a container burial, very similar to the one we have on the wagon. So the reason I mention that is, in a shrouded burial, we don't remove any of the earth. It all goes back into the gravesite itself. So there's really no burial mound. But for instance, this one here has a wicker container. And actually that's quite strong. So it's going to take a little bit of time for that to collapse and look like this here. Essentially it's just going back to the earth as we've come. I became a cemeterian kind of by happenstance. I didn't inherit my family cemetery. It was given to the community we lived in for hundreds of years, and then it fell into disrepair, and my brother's buried here. So I approached the owner who had bought it back from the township, and he had a proposition. He said, I'll give it to you. And in turn, I created a space for recreation, not even knowing anything about natural burial. So I put in trails and I invited the community out. And that's kind of how I started it. And then I learned about natural burial after the fact. What we're doing is not being done in other places. So now we have 13 different locations in 7 different states. And that speaks volumes as to what we're doing. The families are very, very involved from start to finish. They can care for the loved ones at home if they wish. They can bring them here if they wish. So what we've done is we've created something that helps the family accept someone's passing. But it's not a bad thing because we all pass. So instead of grieving, they're able to celebrate a life that was lived. The beautiful thing about a place like this is we allow them to plant trees or shrubs as a living memorial. It must be indigenous to the Pine Barrens, so that is a requirement. But a lot of times what we tell families to do is to pick a sapling within our own forest. It germinated here, it's surviving and thriving. And with the natural field stones, they're of a natural state, not polished. They can be a piece of granite or whatever, is indigenous to the mid-Atlantic. They can be engraved, can be painted. Sometimes people choose nothing at all, though, believe it or not. We have many graves that are unmarked. That's just the decision that the loved ones have made. You'll watch them run the gamut of emotions, happiness, sadness, and then ultimately you can see everything washing away. And when they're done, you've changed them. And they'll look at you and they give you a thank you. And it's not that a traditional service doesn't deserve a thank you. It's just different. They found something different. And they leave here with smiles on their faces. And, to make a funeral a memorable experience. I mean, who wants to remember a funeral? But that's what we do.